Quicksort function takes array and two indexes. These indexes indicates the part of the array that we are sorting. In initial call, this should be 0 and length -1, because the to index is index of last number that we want to sort. When to and from is equal, this means that we have one number to be sorted, and one number is already sorted, so we stop the recursion. If there are more than one number, we do partition. This function takes three arguments, array and from and to indexes. And it does the thing that you saw in explanation. So it grabs the pivot and moves smaller elements to left side and bigger on right side. And then it returns index where our pivot is. And we do recursive calls on left and right part. I hope that makes sense. Let me show you how the partition works. When doing partition, we grab the last number and set it as our pivot. There are a couple other ways to pick pivot, since we want the pivot to be somewhere in the middle of the sorted array. Why? Because then we get the full power of recursion. If pivot is always the smallest number, the pivot will end up on from index, and that way we only have right part, because there are no numbers on left. So the time complexity would be n squared. But if pivot is somewhere in middle, we get better balance between the left and right recursive calls, so the complexity would be n times log n. So the other way to pick a pivot is to pick a few numbers, for example first, last and some number in the middle, and take the median value from them. That way we have better chance that the pivot should be somewhere in middle. You may try this, but in this implementation I just pick the last number and hope it ends up somewhere in middle. So, as you saw in the explanation video, we had a wall which splitted the smaller and bigger numbers. The wall in implementation is just an index of first number behind wall from explanation. Then we go through every number in the part that we want to sort, except the last one, because the last one is our pivot. And we check whether the current element is smaller or equal to our pivot. If it is, we swap the current element with first number behind our wall. And since we have the index of this number in wall variable, we do the classic swap and increment wall. The incrementation is the same as when we moved our wall by one number in explanation video. And after we go through every number, we move our pivot to its correct place by swapping it with first number behind our wall. And since we have the last number already stored in our pivot variable, we don't need the temp variable, we can just rewrite the last element and then set the first number behind our wall to our pivot. Then we return wall because that is the index where our pivot ends up. And we use this index to calculate the from and to indexes in recursive calls. As I said before, you can try to change the way the pivot is picked, so that you take the average from first, last and middle number. And I suggest you pause the video, because in a few seconds I will show you how to do that. Okay, so the idea is to pick first, middle and last number, and then take median value. So first we need function that returns the median value for three values. That is this function. It takes an input array and three indexes. And what it does? It creates a new array which contains these three elements. Sort this new array using selection sort, and then it looks at the middle number, which is just the element on index 1, and checks whether it is the first, middle, or last element, and it returns corresponding index. So we pass to this function three indexes, and it returns us the index of median value. We store the result into variable. We pick our pivot, and some of you might end here, but we still have to check whether the pivot is last number or not. If it is, we can just continue with the cycle, but if it is not, we have to swap it with last number. Because in the rest of the code we are assuming that the pivot is at index 2. So we are not comparing it in the for cycle. Now, you might think that I forgot to set the last element, which is the element on index 2, to our current pivot. Well, I did not, since we are just using the pivot variable, and in the end we set the last number to first element behind wall, so we can delete the commented line. If you don't understand something, just ask, I will try to help you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.